On a summer morning in 1518, a woman stepped into a narrow street in Strasbourg and began to dance. There was no music, no festival, no reason anyone could see. She simply danced, and she did not stop. Not that afternoon, not that night. By the time she finally collapsed, days had passed, and her shoes were dark with blood. And then something impossible happened. Her neighbours began to dance too. Within a week, more than 30 people were dancing in the streets. Within a month, as many as 400. And here is the part that is hardest to believe. The city's own doctors looked at the dying dancers and prescribed more dancing. This really happened. It fills 6 separate chronicles and the records of the city council itself. Everything about the dancing plague of Strasbourg is written down. The names, the streets, the bleeding feet, everything, that is, except the one thing that matters. Why? To understand what people saw that summer, you first have to understand the year. Because 1518 was a terrible time to be alive in Strasbourg. Think of everything pressing down on that city at once. 3 failed harvests, a brutal, killing winter, smallpox moving through the houses, and a frightening new disease they called the Great Pox, the sickness we now know as syphilis. People were starving, exhausted, and afraid. This is the ground the plague grew in. The woman who started it has a name in the records, Frau Trofea. One July day she began to dance, alone, without a sound, and kept going for the better part of a week. A physician of the age described the afflicted plainly. They danced with vacant eyes, drenched in sweat, crying out for help, even as their own legs refused to stop. Some danced until they fell. Strasbourg was a city that loved to dance, at weddings, at feasts, in the guild halls. But no one had ever seen dancing like this. And now the men who ran the city had to decide what it was, because whatever they decided, they were about to act on it, and their decision would make everything worse. The physicians of Strasbourg reached for the medicine of their time. They examined the dancers and settled on a diagnosis that sounds strange to us now, but made perfect sense to them. Overheated blood. The body, they reasoned, had grown too hot, and the only cure was to let that heat burn itself out. In other words, the dancers simply needed to keep dancing until the fever was gone. So the city helped them, and this is where the records become almost unbearable to read. Guild halls were cleared to make room. A wooden stage was built. Musicians were hired to play hour after hour. Strong men were paid to hold the exhausted upright and keep their legs moving. The authorities of Strasbourg, trying to save these people, had built them a machine for dancing themselves to death. It did exactly what you would fear. Surrounded by drums and pipes, and the sight of others already lost to it, more and more people fell in. 30 became 100. 100 climbed toward 400, and according to the chronicles, the dancers began to die. Of strokes, of heart attacks, of sheer exhaustion. One account claims that at the height of it, as many as 15 people were dying every single day. Only now did the council see its terrible mistake, and it reversed course completely, tore down the stages, silenced the music, and banned public dancing across the city. But the thing they had helped set loose was not so easy to call back. For centuries afterward, people wanted a cause they could hold in their hands, and in the 1950s they found a candidate. Its name is ergot. Ergot is a fungus. It grows on rye, the very grain that fed the poor of the Rhine Valley, and it thrives in cold, damp years, exactly like the ones before 1518. And ergot is not harmless. It carries alkaloids chemically related to LSD. Eat bread milled from infected rye, and you can suffer convulsions, hallucinations, a burning in the limbs that the medieval world called Saint Anthony's fire. Here, at last, was a physical explanation. Starving people eat the only bread they have. The bread is poisoned, and the poison sets their bodies twitching and their minds reeling. It fits the hunger, it fits the failed harvests, it even seems to fit the writhing. For a long time, this was the textbook answer, and if you stop the story right here, it is convincing, but the historians who looked harder found a problem, and then another, and slowly the fungus began to fall apart. Ergot poisoning does something very specific. By choking the blood vessels, it starves the hands and feet, often so badly that the flesh dies and blackens. It brings on seizures, not sustained, purposeful movement. Ask a doctor today, and they will tell you the same thing. A person poisoned that badly cannot dance in steps for days on end. They would be far too sick to stand. Yet the chronicles describe dancing, hours of it, days of it, not the blackened limbs that ergot leaves behind. And there is a second problem, which may be the deeper one. The dancing plagues almost always struck the same narrow corridor of Europe, the towns strung along the Rhine and the Moselle. Different soils, different crops, different weather, but the same affliction again and again for more than a century before Strasbourg ever danced. A poison in the bread cannot explain a pattern that follows a culture instead of a harvest. So a growing number of historians point somewhere else, not to the body, but to the mind. Their argument runs like this. Push human beings past the edge of endurance, famine, plague, dread without end, and the mind can break in strange collective ways. And the people of the Rhine already carried a specific fear. They believed that a saint named Vitus could seize the sinful and force them to dance. If you believed that deeply, and you were already shattered, then in a trance you might do the very thing you dreaded most. When nothing else had worked, the city turned at last to that same saint. The worst afflicted were carried up into the hills to a shrine of St. Vitus at Saverne. Priests stood them before a wooden image of the saint. They pressed small crosses into their hands. They slipped red shoes onto their ruined feet. And then, slowly, strangely, the dancing stopped. By the first days of September, the streets of Strasbourg were quiet again. And that is where the honest account has to end, not with an answer, but with a weighing. What we know is real. Strasbourg's dancing plague happened. Hundreds of people danced against their own will in the summer of 1518, and some of them very likely died for it. The records are too many and too plain to doubt. What we are less sure of is the scale. That haunting figure, 15 deaths a day, comes from chronicles written a full century later, not from the city's own clerks, who counted no bodies at all. And what we may never know is the cause. The poison and the mind each explain a part of it, and neither one explains all of it. Some historians now argue we have been asking the wrong question the whole time, that a suffering body in a world of hunger and faith and terror does not need a single tidy diagnosis, that the dance itself was the meaning, a whole city in agony, moving to music that no one wanted to hear. So what do you think it was? a sickness in the grain or a sickness in the mind. And that is where I will leave it. And if there is a mystery you would love to see untangled, tell me. Until the next one.